Welcome to the Markets Happy Hour podcast, a weekly markets update for investors the world over. Each week we discuss inflation, geopolitics, interest rates, equity markets, and other asset classes. To try to answer the question, what does this mean for my investment portfolio? Let's dive in.
I'd like to ask you, given your work at Vistamark and your work with institutional investors, how are you thinking about the trajectory of inflation today and building resilience into portfolios around that?
No, it's very timely, Eve, and we're just finishing up our 10-year capital market assumptions projections for the next decade, where inflation is obviously a big piece of that. And, we've been doing that for 25 plus years, and there's really been 2 years within the history. 2009 and 2021 were 2 years that we sort of deviated from our normal methodology, or really just looking at the break-even inflation rate between the nominal and the tip. Kind of that difference really being the implied break-even inflation rate expected by market participants. I think we're finally back. Back in 2001, the market wasn't pricing in much inflation. They'd missed kind of the entire COVID. All the seeds that were planted in 2020 for inflation, and we sort of expected that to come, and of course we were right in terms of boosting that. And we had a similar dynamic in 2009 when kind of a flight to quality liquidity kind of boosted the nominal relative to the tip sort of artificially. We thought that it baked into the markets was zero inflation for the next 10 years. If you looked at the tips break-even spread in 2009, that was obviously didn't make any sense to us. But I think we're finally in an environment now going forward where we're back to a more normalized inflation number, right around 2.2, that break-even inflation rate. So I think we're coming back into a normalized inflationary type of market. And I think a big part of that is, in addition to kind of the more normalization of global trade and things like that, to the extent, or new normal anyway, we have, I think, probably one of the biggest disinflationary forces ever to hit the markets, and that's really the AI. Similar to what China was many, many years ago. China was the biggest exporter of deflation really across the world like 20 plus years ago, and I think AI is going to have a similar dynamic to that.
That's a really interesting thread, and I think let's just jump into that now, because that what's your time frame on that as a deflationary force? Because I think we've had the Cathie Wood narrative around tech, the gig economy, the ever cheaper components, etc., which has been a deflationary pulse. We then disturbed that with COVID and some of the supply chain issues. But right now, it seems that AI spending is dominating. When we have had charts in previous podcasts looking at CapEx spending of the large tech companies alone, and that has skyrocketed. So clearly spending on AI is taking up a lot. And when do you think we'll start to see the benefits of this disinflationary force?
Well, I think we're seeing it in the areas of the economy that aren't tech. And I think everyone's focused, rightfully so, on the profits that are going to be made directly by AI companies, hardware providers of chips and software developers that are kind of creating the technology, this magical. I think my grandfather, World War II era, would think this is just magic. That's kind of how incredible this is. But what's being missed really is insurance companies, healthcare companies, all these other companies deploying this technology, like our business, my business. Businesses, just normal businesses deploying it, where I think 90+% of the economic benefits and the disinflationary aspects are going to circle through to mainline companies that basically are able to either increase their profit margins or reduce the price of their services over time. And I really think that's the piece that's really disinflationary. Of course, there might be an inflationary piece because of the demand of chips and things like that kind of happening. But I think the much bigger impact is really going to be that technology being deployed. Think about, the world before we had the personal computer and before we had Microsoft and we had Windows and, everything was. I remember when I had to drive back into the office at night if I wanted to check my emails. That's how old I am, and just kind of how this new phase of technology is really just taking it to the next level in a very, very extreme way.